Thank you so much. Welcome to the panel. And hello, everyone. If you could just hear, if everyone's around, can you just, I know it's a post-lunch session, just be a little awake with us in terms, this is an important topic, how PR shapes reputation, responsibility, and results. And I think the panel here is an opportunity for all of us to learn from. Thank you so much for doing this. What we're trying to do is we'll try and cover about 4 or 5 topics through the session, which gives a very good view on how reputation's kind of impacting organizations or what's happening with reputation in today's world. What I'll do is I'll kick off the session by asking all the panelists here about what's really today the new meaning of reputation, keeping in mind that we are in a hyper-connected world today, and the definition of reputations being discussed. Is it creating credibility? Is it consistency? So for each one of you, what would the definition of reputation today would be, keeping in mind that we are in a digital age, and there are a lot of skeptics out there right now kind of questioning reputation and what's the impact it's having on organizations. So Amit, you want to kick off and then we can...
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for the question, and hello all of you, and it's nice to be on the panel here. I think reputation has different layers as per different businesses and different touch points every businesses have. For a business like ours, which probably is extremely gray, like I come from a background which is into cement, and when we talk of cement, we are talking something which is extremely rural, something which people even don't understand. For them, if I may use Hindi over here, दिन का मुआवजा काफ़ी है. That's the reputation for them. That if this company as a mason, if it's giving me right money and right product, I have a reputation. Yeah, maybe my touch point for other business is different. So reputation is extremely layered. However, I think with the media being around and you have the physical to digital, it makes an impact, because today if somebody is seeing something, somebody who is not even associated with might comment on it in the future. So reputation comes in layers. What makes a difference is if you have an actual product cut point versus if you're experiencing it versus if you really know about it or not. Yeah, or it's just known to you. So I think that layers one has to bridge, and every organization, I believe, will have a challenge to bridge those layers at every point of time, and that's why the narrative for reputation for every organization has to be different as per different stakeholders. These are my few words on it. Over to you.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks, Abhishek. Lovely to be here. I agree with what he was talking about. Different stakeholders, different, what you want to do. The good thing about the mix that's here is I think we've come from varied backgrounds. I cannot talk IT or ITES or anything related to virtual stuff because I've worked in automobiles. I've worked now currently in consumer goods. So I've always had a product in the hand, or a product that we were selling to government. I used to work for a company called Alstom. Before this, it was trains and metros. The customer was the government. Before that, I was with automobiles, Renault, Nissan, Volvo, cars. Then you had a customer who was driving. Today, the customer for Colgate is your dealer and distributor. The consumer is now there because there's one more layer added, and the person is actually consuming your product. So I think reputation, like he said, while it has an overarching piece on what is done, what can be done, what I want to bring to the foray is reputation the responsibility of PR in an organization? The answer is really no. It's everything. The product has to be good, the messaging has to be good. You need to ensure that you're talking to who's going to consume or who your customer is, then be ready for crisis. So it's like a whole piece on it. And then the last piece, of course, everybody's saying, oh, do consumers actually connect with a company that they think is reputed and want to buy, etc., etc.? I'm guessing we'll come to that later on and we'll see, because consumers ultimately buy a benefit. Once they might pay additional for a brand, but then after that, they only see value in what you're able to deliver. So I think reputation goes just beyond our shoulders. It also is the shoulder of, and I think some of us here have had the advantage of doing not just corporate communications, but also Marcom, right? Which is, in some companies, that's a combination. In some companies, they're two different verticals. So the whole messaging on what you do in advertising or marketing, plus what you do in PR, has to go hand in hand to ensure that you're building the right repute for the company or for the brand.
Minari, sorry, I just want to come in and kind of pose a slightly different question on corporate reputation. I'm going to pick up what was said earlier, right? I think 2 points were made. One is that reputation is different for different stakeholders. And the other point that was made was you need to have a good product, do you really need that for reputation, or can reputation be made for a company even if you don't have those things?
So the way I see it is, first of all, no, I don't think you can sustain a good reputation if you don't have a good product, offering, service, etc. So first of all, I don't think that's sustainable. The vice versa is not true. You can have a great product or an offering, but you can still have a terrible reputation. Unfortunately, that does happen in the real world, and that's an issue. But let me, take it a little further away to say, I kind of agree with what you said, that it is about something that lies beyond just the communications and PR and corporate communications. I think the difference is it's the communications team which owns reputation as a mandate, and it's, to me, literally perhaps among the most, if not the most, widest scoped roles possible. So it could be an HR issue, it could be a finance issue. We've seen scandals, we've seen Byju's, we've seen Uber and Me Too issues, we've seen all kinds of it. It could be a product issue, it could be recalls. There's literally nothing that reputation doesn't handle. So yes, reputation matters. We do own that. And I think it's the job of the communicators and the comms teams to keep bringing the big picture together. It's astonishing having worked with all these large companies across the board, whether it's tech, Dell and Amazon, whether it's Tata Motors. It's amazing sometimes how often there are silos in the best of companies. And comms teams often have the tasks of owning reputation and bringing that narrative together. The other key point, Abhishek, that I want to call out is the world as it's changed. It's not just the digital piece which is changing. So yes, there is the speed of response, consistency, global, all of that. But the bigger thing is policy. The level of policy interventions and scrutiny that exists today across every single company or industry is more than it ever was. And bringing that together, you could say that, oh, you know what, DEI is becoming irrelevant today because of the new government regime. You still need to navigate it. You still need to think about how do you navigate that messaging, whether you're backtracking, whether you're standing for it, whether you're being neutral. One way or the other, you need an adept communications professional to navigate through very murky and difficult waters, even more so when it's like, across the geographies and so on. So I think that piece of reputation of pulling together the product, the policy, the multiple different aspects, and owning it and bringing it into a cohesive thing, I think is where the real big piece is.
If can I just come in and basically say that if you could just extend to what Minari was saying about and kind of bring in from how does corporate communications actually respond to the boardroom, right? Where all the issues are, talent's an issue, trade war is an issue, supply chain's an issue. So the impact of AI on the business is an issue. How do we kind of elevate or the corporate communication department becomes relevant for that in the question that we're trying to address in terms of the role of corporate communications?
I agree with what everybody was saying here, and to Shilpa Shree's point that it's very true, the reputation is not just owned by the comms team, but extending on what Minari was saying, corporate communications effectively becomes sort of that core engine that is we have the responsibility, and we cannot shirk it, that we are the body that needs to keep everybody honest. So be it the boardroom, be it sensitizing your stakeholders, be it HR policies, be it DEI, be it sustainability, we are the underlying engine, and that is where the relevance and importance is. Even be it asking the simple question. We are having a very interesting conversation on the sidelines about own content. I spent a better half of my career as a journalist, and that's where the shift to corporate communication made sense to me, because now more than ever before, with upcoming technologies, the importance for companies to be authentic is relevant. I don't think it has been that relevant than it is in this age, right? Be it the changing policies, be it economic instabilities. I head comms for a company that sees an impact in every single economic churn, and you have to be relevant, you have to keep adapting, you have to be agile. And the core of it at the end of the day is, do you know who you are? Do you know what your purpose is? Do you know what your values are? Do you know what your policies are? Do you know what your risk factors are? Are you able to then understand yourself and then adapt and deploy? And at the core of it, are you able to authentically tell your story? So a big part of what I have tried to bring of my big part of my former career into this particular engine, and that is something which I think I really resonate with what Minari's journey has also been, where do stories come in here? It's pure authenticity. We've created something called TCS Studios within the company, and this is TCS has been a crown jewel of Tata Group. The reputation was sort of taken care of, but then what next? Because the world is changing as we know it. So they felt the necessity to bring somebody in who can tell that story. And where I came in, that's the big part of what we had to discuss. Who are we? What do we want to say in the long term? Can we bring all of this together and bring that realness into it? And that's where all of us bear that responsibility of looking at all the vehicles, be it in terms of creating content, make content that people want to see and read. You don't have to go through the traditional channels. Think multi 360 degree and go beyond. Often I get asked, and on a daily basis, my team is facing these questions about, is this really our job? ये तो मतलब corporate affairs का काम है या तो ये किसी और का काम है, but we are actually the underlying layer. And if you're able to step in, technically, we need to have one foot in the door in everything, otherwise it won't function.
Shonali, you want-
I just want to say one quick point to this. I would simply put it as, you need to be the mirror to the business.
Absolutely.
It's the comms role to ask the hardest, most critical questions that could be a challenge for the business or the reputation. And that is the biggest role, to be the conscience keepers, to be the mirror.
Shonali, I want to ask, say, how much do you agree or disagree with all of
Yeah,
what we said?
No, thank you. Actually, I wanted to be slightly divergent on a couple of things, but especially on the conscience keepers bit, I have to agree. At the same time, the corollary also exists that communications as a function, because it's dependent on making peace with so many stakeholders across different departments. There is an expectation that the communications person will be the S. Jaishankar in the room, right? The diplomat who balances both ends of the wheel. So at times, as much as you want to be a conscience keeper, you end up becoming the peacemaker. And that is not necessarily a bad thing, I feel, because reputation, and I want to maybe combine a couple of points there. It's great to want to be authentic. I think that's something that organizations increasingly need to do. There has been a recent study that said that about 72% of businesses in AP, organizations or people, respondents felt that about 72% people trust businesses over governments. It's because we say a story that is believable. And why is that believable? Because repetition never spoils a prayer. Amazon won't tomorrow start trying to be different things to different people, or Lenovo or TCS or Colgate Palmolive, or of course the Nirma Group for that matter. So that consistency in storytelling, which is so vital to maintaining that authenticity, I think that in more ways impacts reputation. At the same time, trust, it's a much abused word. It's something that we use very freely sometimes. It carries so much responsibility. I sometimes feel that, when we say comms is the conscience keeper, I would say comms is the peacemaker. I think the responsibility that we end up sharing in the boardroom and trying to sort of get through to internal and external stakeholders is, how do we maintain that trust, or maybe consolidate it or grow it through our actions, whether they are more on the media relations side of things, or whether it is on policy communications, or related functions as well.
A conscious keeper and a peacekeeper, right? So interesting one. I want to jump onto the second area now on really the role of comms in the whole local routes to global impact. In a world where, again, we're kind of extending on the digital age where information travels very quickly, do we still have borders on reputation? Can companies be thinking locally and in an environment which is a lot more global? So, Minar, if you want to kind of take the question on, is reputation today truly global, or do brands need to craft more localized narratives and maintain trust in different markets? And specifically from companies that you work for where there's global, but there's also a lot of localization. How do you play with that? And if you would want to come in after this.
I think, yes, reputation is global, and what happens in one part of the world immediately impacts the other. So absolutely. The biggest balancing act that we do as rope walkers is the fact that we need to remain globally consistent with who we stand for, but be locally relevant. So if we're talking Amazon, for example, yes, Amazon has always stood for its customer obsession and, reliable, delivery and speed and so on, right? The trust that it has with customers. But at the same time, it could not be tone deaf to what is happening in the countries that it's in present. So the base issues, might be something different in a US or a UK or a Germany versus in an India and a China and so on. And it's important to kind of then pull together that strategy and make it locally relevant. So in India, it could be that we really want to talk about the empowerment of small businesses, which may or may not always be the gist of the story somewhere else. In Australia, it might be that, hey, sustainability is something that we really want to talk about because Woolworth's going all out and talking sustainability. So you pick and choose which elements are you going to highlight, but you cannot remain inconsistent with the global narrative and messaging. You remain true to who you are, but you obviously have to talk about the stories that are most locally relevant.
Shonali, you want to come in?
Sure, I think here, Minari, of course, I have to agree wholeheartedly. And somewhere when we go down the rabbit hole and try and find just the right message that works for the right set of audiences, there is always that challenge and an opportunity that exists. The challenge is how do we appeal more, or how do we connect more closely with our audience there? So for instance, we could be selling or maybe promoting the same metal box, say an AI server, for instance, because to Shilpa Shree's point, services and consumer goods, it's always a little fluid. You have to use your imagination to assume that that metal box is going to lead to impactful outcomes in a hospital or maybe at a space station. So when you're selling that, how do you ensure that your customer or your media audience, or finally whoever is picking up the newspaper and learning more about you, feels that you're the right, you have the right purpose in mind? And at the other end of the spectrum, how do you make sure that your core message, for instance, if it's smarter technology for all, how does that come through very clearly? So that combination of global plus local, it's always nice to use those euphemisms and say go local. Difficult to actually ensure that it gets conveyed in the right way and appears the right way through the right measurement metrics, that the fact that it's still relevant, it's resonating with the right audiences, that measurement becomes extremely challenging.
I want to come to both of you, right? And you from a reverse of it. As Indian companies looking global, right? Because the expectations, are the expectations different, standards different, how you're judged different? How much of a challenge is that when you're trying to take the reputation of what you've stood for in a local organization to a more global environment?
A part of my job is also ensuring that in the 10 years from now, TCS isn't called an Indian company. The work that we are doing, I know, right? We are multinational companies on the global stage with, India just about 4.5% of the business. We're trying to change that. But the one challenge that I know I face when there's, 55 countries, every country has a different team altogether, different business function, different stakeholders. I feel sometimes you just have to de-jargonize it and get to the, okay, what are our key levers? So in tech, You cannot have different views on AI. You can't have different views of cybersecurities. They're very important levers that you have to first identify. Every single business will have these important levers, these important functions, which are going to be the sort of the shifters for the next decade or next 2 decades. So if you have your important levers identified, have a core underlying strategy across, because the truth is we are hyper-connected. We cannot, something that goes viral in US is relevant to every single, it's often a dinner table conversation over here. So we cannot isolate ourselves from how hyper-connected and how digital we are, how social we are in our approach and in our daily interactions with each other. So it's important to then ensure that there is that sensitivity. Something that may be sensitive in India may not be that relevant in US or may not be that relevant in Europe. But at the same time, all sensitivities need to be mapped into that core underlying layer. And then you create localized strategy on the other outer layers that are very, very important. And thereby you have those different stakeholders identified.
Amit, you want to add to this?
Yes, so I think, I would like to add an additional layer to what we say to the global, the local. The additional layer for companies like us, which have a very strong local footprint, is actually going hyper local. So we are not even looking at local trend in terms of what we have in terms of reputation, but hyper local. Taking an example just now when we are sitting, Holi as a festival, if we may relate. Because we look at it, I have a completely different narrative and a storytelling approach when I'm trying to do something in UP, but it is not at all relevant when I'm trying to do the same thing in Bangalore. So, where the narratives right now, I think are three. The one narrative is when you're coming from global to India. So, for some of my previous organizations like Bosch, if I may say, we had to carry forward the global narrative into India. Then there was an India to global narrative, where if you were to work in like SR, if I have to say, it was a global. There you have to put a different hat, be authentic in terms of how this story can translate. But for companies like Nuoco, which are strictly India, I'm going hyper local. So my reputation there also goes in a hyper local way where things change. So I think it's from a 2-layer, it's moved to a 3-layer story now. That's what my take.
Shubhashi, you want to add to the...
Okay, yeah, I just want
hyper-
I'll just take a minute on this. I've only worked in multinats except for 8 months in an agency when I just started. Most of us who work in multinationals and all of you would realize that the first thing when you get into the organization, they'll say, global ka jo hai, wahi karo. It's very clear, right? But there is merit in actually building your niche own story for the country. Trust me, all of us sitting here will tell you the same thing, because it's very easy. They'll say, you know what, this is not how we deal with it in America, this is not how we deal with it in Sweden. But then you need to tell them India is different, right? Your customers here are different, your media here is different, your government here is different. I'll give you an example. So I work for a French company, and we were doing like Alstom trains and metros, and I'll tell you how it impacted on reputation as well. The narrative in most places is, oh, you know what, you've shut shops or you've closed a few big factories in Europe and you're moving jobs here. And Alstom, in fact, used to make metros out of the Sri City plant for Montreal, like a pura bana hua, you can think of a metro wrapped and being shipped, not even parts. Sydney Metro, completely designed and made in India, right? It's a great story for us. But they were like, can we not do this? Macron was coming to India, they're like, you know what, he'll get backlash there because they have the workers' union, they are really strong. But then I said, boss, we are here for the long haul. We've got like, and at that point when I was there, Alstom had like a €4.5 billion order book in India, right? It's big for you. And you need to do it. So we used to do a lot of Make in India stories, gung ho, like the PM, without even having to push on anything, had mentioned us in various of his interviews, and the Piyush Goyals and the Ashwini Vaishnavs. So it built a great narrative for us. And my global team also understood. They said, it's okay, Shilpa, we'll manage agar aaya to. But nobody really picked it up and said, oh, you know what, you're giving the jobs to India. It never came. But then the thing was, shayad ye aayega, isliye hum baat nahi karna chahte. And I'll tell you how it helped. We were on Twitter. We've been on LinkedIn. We always do our industrial stories. Train manufacture ho gaya, ye ho gaya, engine ho gaya. There are sometimes, one of these people will say, you know what, but phir bhi isko na Indian Railway se karna chahiye, ye karna chahiye. I'm telling you, we didn't have to do anything. कुछ नहीं करना था. People would jump in and say, भाई तू जानता है क्या इन्होंने कितनी नौकरियां की है पता है तुमको this, it's like a jewel in India's crown da da da. It would be lovely to see people who don't even like it's not even consuming a product, right? And only after I joined Alstom I realized India, especially boys, where there is cricket on one level, there is railways on the other level. They would chase our trains and do videos with songs, and people are crazy, But then that's only happening if you were to build a story that resonates with the India that you are delivering to. And like he said, you go hyperlocal, you go national, whatever it is, but ensure you do the right storytelling. Then reputation is built. People then trust you as a company. And it's not like, I want to travel in this train because it's built by Alstom. That's not the piece, right? It's about, I want to aspire to work in this company. I want to work for these because, this is how they are. They are not really like just talking about Firangs. They're talking about India. They're very local. RCU, I didn't even have to do one thing. I was in fact talking about, a lot of times people say when you have a loose cannon CEO, the responsibility of ensuring crisis doesn't, snowball is on us, no? Sorry. Right? I mean, why has it got to be, that's the only time, that's the first time they'll pick up the phone on COPCOM. Otherwise, you're always like, acha, aa jao yaar, ye meeting chal raha hai. Otherwise, you're the first one to do crisis. So, I'm saying having a spokesperson, and my previous spokesperson, Firang, but the way he used to talk, because long timer in India, didn't have to do much effort on him. He used to say, our Prime Minister, he used to say, our nation. And the journalist one day, first time somebody met him and said, Shilpa, I can't believe this gentleman is actually calling India his home. I said, but that comes naturally to him. I didn't even have to put it in his mouth, but it comes naturally. But that's something that you build, and that's how reputation builds for your products and for your company and for your offerings.
I just want to call out one quick nuance. I'm not disagreeing with anyone here. I think we sometimes make the mistake of mixing up the strategy and high-level messaging with the tactical implementation of that messaging. I don't think globally we stand for different things. If Amazon stands for customer obsession, it stands for customer obsession everywhere. If Amazon stands for being reliable, having the best cloud offering with AWS or any of that, it stands for that globally. What changes is the proof points and the local stories. And that's where I think I completely agree with Amit. I've been there. I've done, at Amazon, Holi and Onam and right? Because, people shop differently for different. So I think it's about finding locally relevant proof points and stories. So I think we need to make sure that we are not differentiating, mixing that up a lot of times.
Minori, I want to continue with the stakeholder balancing act, right? In terms of the fact that, do you think in today's world, and I want to pick up on what Amit's also said about multiple stakeholders, right? Is there a situation where you could have, is reputation a constant across multiple stakeholders? Or you could have different reputation with different audiences? And if you're struggling with one, could you still continue? For example, maybe you're struggling at advocates, but you're doing very well with the consumers, right? Is that a possibility in today's world, or is reputation a constant across stakeholders?
Yeah, it's definitely not a constant across stakeholders. It's definitely something that's a very dynamic, very fluid situation. And for most of the companies, it changes over a period of time. So I think it's really critical that, we all know all the key stakeholders, right? Customers, policy and regulators, civil society, activists, employees, supply chain, partners, all of these. And at every given point, we need mechanisms that allow us to look at which stakeholder is the biggest business blocker at this point in time. So sometimes it could be that, for Amazon, if I take the example, that, Amazon was loved by customers. And Amazon was something that people really loved the offering and so on. But then we had to be very explicit in terms of what was Amazon bringing to India for the policymakers and regulators to understand that narrative and that story better. So we had to focus on that a little bit. That could change in a current situation and so on, right? So I think that's definitely always a fluid, changing situation. There could be companies, Google went through this in the US some years back, when there was a significant amount of employee activism. In this part of the world, we haven't seen that so far, so much of it. But in the Western Hemisphere, that's become a driving force on many things in the past. They had to actually say a no to certain kinds of defense contracts. So, so is it employees? Is it the supply chain? Companies that deal with China as a major supply chain, have to deal with the geodynamics and figure out how are they going to manage that situation, and how are they going to, whether it's the semiconductor industry, whether it's, even e-commerce industry, and all of these, right? So it's always something that varies, but it's something that needs constant auditing, monitoring, and managing.
What do you want to add?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things here which I feel is, definitely I agree that it's different. Your stakeholders across your reputation is different. You have to take, and I would just say there are three layers to it when we add it. One is related with what has the experience been with a particular stakeholder. The second is what has the perception that particular stakeholder has carried about you for over a time. And the third is purely decision making. If, for example, decision making. For example, I may say in a particular state with a particular government, when we had to deploy large scale infrastructure, say, we were not in a certain way that were carried forward. Okay, or maybe right decisions could not be taken by the members of management or whatever. That led to a certain kind of a perception. That led to a certain kind of a reputation. So, largely with different stakeholders, your experiences, your perception carries a very large role over here, the way we look forward to, and it changes time and again. The more positive experiences you will have, the more better impact on the reputation. So, it evolves, it changes, and it is never constant with anybody.
I think the only piece to also think about when you talk about balancing is which are the stakeholders and which are the issues you're actually going to be able to impact and change needle moving wise through PR. There was a situation, let's say an app, has a really bad user interface for a certain category. And if there is another company that's doing a really good job of that category, you can PR till doomsday come, and you're not going to change that.
Yeah.
So I think it's like I've actually turned around and told business, I'm not going to bother doing that. That's not a problem you'll solve with PR. So it was an important stakeholder, but you can't solve it with PR.
I want to club this with Kritika. I mean, the next question actually correlates to it in a way in terms of corporate and brand reputation divide, in terms of the fact that can it be a situation where the corporate image is struggling, but the brands are doing well? All right. Are those situations, are there any examples out here which kind of can bring it to light in terms of situations where, and how do you manage that? Because those are real things, right? It happens to brands where people continue to stand outside your stores to buy the products, but hey, you're doing something somewhere which is under scrutiny, right? So how does that work?
I think that ties in with the earlier point. The only time where I feel there can be so while I agree that yes, you can have different pockets and you can excel in one area so you can excel in your brand reputation when there could be some shifts in corporate reputation. But I feel if the core foundation of your the core business, if that is under threat, and there is an issue with trust and transparency and regulatory framework, for instance, then that gets threatened. For instance, if there is a fraud in the company, or if it's an IT company and there is a very clear issue company-wide when it comes to cybersecurity, when there is a company-wide hacking, what is your core business? So in Google, for instance, there was employee activism, there was conversation about how Google is a horrible place to work, and today it's still number one because it is a cutting-edge company. It is pervasive in all our habits. So there was a difference in the corporate reputation at that particular point and the brand that the company carried. So I feel that if your core business and your core function is transformative and you've gotten your reputation engagement activities right there in those messaging, and again, there's many areas to it, there's values, there's purpose, all of that needs to be ingrained into it. But if those elements are right, then the other stuff can follow. It's like, your pillars need to be correct, the building will come in over there. So broadly, Google is a big example of that, but I think even in India, you've seen cases, without going too much into details, but you've seen big groups who've had massive shifts at the top, including the one that I'm working with right now. But there was an underlying corporate reputation, and there was an underlying core business reputation in all the businesses that were functioning, where even when there was a downturn, the core was strong. So it tides that storm because the core of what you're doing is authentic and strong there.
I think just one quick point to that example would be to remember that one, I think we are long-term management people. We don't look at, like, it's a marathon. Reputation is a marathon.
Yeah.
So if I look at, so one, I think we have to remember is reputation becoming facilitating business or adding to the cost of doing business. To the question of a Google, there is a added cost to doing business.
Yeah.
If it's not going to get easy, ask the best of talent. If they struggle to get the best of talent, if there's scrutiny, until there is a threat of, let's say, antitrust today, it could disrupt Google's business completely. So I think it's important to remember it's a long-term thing.
I want to also you to comment on a couple of things. Sorry, I'm trying to bring this. I want to pick up 2 points, right? One is obviously, do internal stakeholders allow reputation to be a marathon? That's one. And I think Shilpa mentioned something about how reputation works, right? So,
No, of course, I think the first question is, bullseye really. Internal stakeholders want to win every marathon, and they think marathons happen every week. I think that
and it's really 100 meters.
Yes, but really, a lot of times it's also the nature of the issue. I think in many ways, when you say to Kritika's point as well, the core needs to be strong, or when you look at the cost of doing business, as Minari said, somewhere fundamentally we have to understand, and I want to go back to Minari's point from earlier because I have to agree there, is something really a business problem or a PR problem? If it is a PR problem, then it's easier to mitigate that reputational issue. If it's something that doesn't really impact the fundamentals of the business, or someone doesn't wake up overnight and say this is an evil organization, I'm severing all ties with it, those challenges of course are easier to work around. That's where communication steps in. If there is a fundamental issue in the operations of the business, or if there is an element of choice, when we talk about the cost of doing business, if we even look at, say, in the airline industry, I know there is a certain airline that we don't necessarily have alternatives to. So regardless of poor service, if the consumer really doesn't have choice, you can continue to have a certain feeling about the brand, but you will invariably choose it. Is that great strategy in the long term? Maybe not, because ultimately reputation is a marathon, and when the situation becomes better, then most probably consumers will move on to the next best alternative. So this is where that internal stakeholders coming in, counseling the business, that even if your numbers look great, you're hitting your Q3 or Q4 targets, but if your rep track scores are not that great, you should still be worried. That's where the peacemaker, the conscience keeper comes in, and hopefully sometimes you don't necessarily need to be the loudest voice in the room, but data, of course, we live in the age of AI. When you bring the right numbers to the business, you have to believe that people in the boardroom are also equally crazy about wanting to ensure that the organization is sustainable and successful in the long term. It's just about striking the right conversation and using our PR capabilities that we use a lot of times to persuade journalists and a lot of policymakers to see through and understand the value that we bring to the table. A lot of that persuasion and negotiation has to be utilized with internal stakeholders to help them see the other side.
Shilpa, you want to come in on the next part, which is on crisis comebacks and speed of PR. The specific question on that is, and that's a question because I know that gets discussed quite a bit, right? Can there be a toolkit for crisis? Because I know the solution that everybody offers is, hey, there is a toolkit for crisis, right? Or you do these steps and crisis gets. What are your learnings there? If you want to elaborate.
I think crisis comms has also evolved, changed over the years, right? Like, I'll tell you, when I was in Volvo, this is way back, the Volvo driver in Bangalore, very close to our office, they drive, they think they're aircraft guys, right? So this is way back, 2008, I think. He just hit a guy. HAL is very close to the Volvo office in Bangalore, Indranagar. The employee died. Like he hit it. It was in the evening. People were buying sabzi, whatever. They burnt the bus right there. Okay? Now that's one kind over there. Now we've seen stuff that happened with, say, Cadbury, for example, or So there are some crisis points and timings where you must react immediately because you know that this is what has to be done. And I think when I say toolkit, one is the sense of urgency and bringing everybody together, being on the same plate, because ultimately you're the one drafting the holding statements, you're the one managing. Kahin pe bhi kuch question aayega, it has to come to, all those things are fine, but and in today's time, I'll tell you, we've realized, and I think many brands have realized, a lot of things happen online, right? You don't need to react immediately. Trust me. If you don't react and let it'll some of them die. But you should be prepared. You should know in case this snowballs in the next 24 hours, this is what we'll do. But sometimes, and if you ask me, most cases, silence actually helps today. But again, it depends on where the crisis is starting, whether it's something that has happened with a person or something like that, or is this been like one of those online gurus who's giving gyan on your products, etc., and then people are trying to rally. Just to go back, right? What happened with Cadbury's? In case they had kept quiet, Bonvita is Mondelez, right? Yeah. It's like everybody's got, Horlicks has got it, Booster's got it, Milo's got it, everybody's got it. They were the ones who were kind of pulled in, and I'm hoping this will stay in the room. When I met those guys and I asked them, "Bhai, karna hi kyun tha?" They said, "Shilpa, the India strategy was to stay silent, but global said, nahi, humko ye lena hai." And then it went boom, right? Because this kind of tweets and stories come on literally all our products, consumer products. Koi na kuch likh hi raha hota hai. But you need to see if there's merit in what that person is saying or not saying, because otherwise then you are actually adding fuel to the crisis. And that's where we should come in as people who can put in some sense into the stakeholders we work with and say, we know this market, let's take it. Let's sleep on it for another. But you should, like I said, you should be prepped. Agar kal subah kuch aur hua, so then you should know what are the other things you want to do. Otherwise, take it slow and steady. There are different ways of doing things as well, in the right way. I'm saying, reach out to the consumer, figure out what it was, do what it is. Otherwise, you make a hero out of somebody who really didn't need to get that attention. So that's what I'm saying. You need to know how to deal with crisis. And there is, there's a toolkit. There is nothing like, this is the best way to deal with all kinds of these are the 5 steps you should do for everything. No. Like I said,
Amit, you want to add to it, is it? But also I think if you can extend the answer to an ESG, not like comparing the crisis to ESG, but just the next part of it on the role an ESG can play to corporate reputation.
Yeah, so just taking this piece from the crisis, I think there are 2 ways that we look at in crisis from me. The one I can remember, the last crisis, which was a product one, if everybody knows, was just Samsung Note, which globally, and how Samsung changed the entire crisis also to a business opportunity later. The other kind of crisis which I take, since we are all sitting in Delhi, I take that from the Maruti itself, where you had an entire crisis where the managers were, the entire factory people stormed into and they kind of beat up the management. A very different crisis. So I don't think there is a template for crisis. Each crisis comes in. But yes, one of the important way to mitigate the crisis, as we say, is the initiatives that possibly you would take under your environment, under your governance, and under your sustainability, and how you can connect these pieces. See, for example, a company like us, which is hyper-local, if we are invested well in the community, and when we know that community problems are there, say for example, some of our plants are located in places where water could be a red zone. If you know that these are some community initiatives that you take rightly, so that you can evolve them and help them, it is a great way to anticipate and to understand how you can do. So I think the important piece of the entire thing is anticipating things when they are going wrong, and how they are going wrong, and making strategies in place so that you can fix those plugs at a right time with the right stakeholders, so that the impact can be minimal. Anyways, there are opportunists around. In majority cases, crises are triggered by opportunists, and there are opportunities around.
I would just one line answer to that point. While I agree that it has to be customized, it has to be very human, it has to be case to case, a broad toolkit on measurement, on response time is necessary for the teams to have that clarity, for your stakeholders to have clarity, to have that agency working relationship. But at the same time, where we are not able to really on a case-to-case basis, there's board involved or the management involved. While yes, that human connection where you can pick up the phone and talk to the journalist and give them clarity and that trust, that underlying media relations that we were talking about earlier is important. But over here, that communication with the top, your chairman, your that involvement, some kind of a committee, some kind of a core team, some kind of a decision-making body, that is very important to discuss case to case, human to human, customized, tailored point, and at the same time have that toolkit necessary, because you can't function without the toolkit, otherwise it goes completely all over the place.
I agree with Kritika about the mechanism and process needed. One point, we often tend to think of crisis as things which get ambushed, which are tactical and small. The key piece is to remember there are big threats, cybersecurity issues, privacy issues, geodynamics, and those are bigger crises and long-lasting ones, and kind of building that into your strategic bit, I think, is very key.
Shanali, I want to bring you in, and Minari, you then. In terms of how do you measure reputation? Because I know you spoke about it, and we were speaking about it. How do you evaluate it? One is, yes, there are rep tracks and things, but how do you, and there's a data-driven approach, but how do you qualify that to be having a business impact?
I think there is an extrinsic and an intrinsic element to this answer. Of course, I work in technology, so data becomes extremely important. There are, of course, ROI measurements as well that we will look at a basic level. You have, of course, the world has moved to earned media scores and whatnot. But at a very fundamental level, when you walk into a room, generally, and everyone typically in communications or journalism has a nose for news. What is your first thought? You speak to somebody, especially, I think there is this luxury that certain consumer-facing brands have. I would reckon to say with the right audience, a B2B brand also has that same privilege, that you walk into a room and you just ask, what is the first thought that comes to your mind when I say a particular brand? And that's sometimes a very good, a little bit like a poll pundit version of understanding where exactly does the brand's reputation lie. So,
Sorry, Minari, you want to add?
I think it's very clear at times. Are you opening doors? Are you removing blockers? Or are you facilitating business? And when you specifically do that, so yes, there are the data, absolutely critical, rep trackers, absolutely critical, and the quality of rep trackers and what are you measuring in rep trackers goes beyond things like coverage and stuff like that, but actually looking at business outcomes and then very clearly defining which are the key business areas where you facilitated and opened up doors or removed blockers.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And I think just the last part of this, I think individually, if everyone can ask that, answer that question, what would you suggest to the future students of reputation? What's the future? And I think the second part is, for a quick answer, is because I think there's a general the interest, and I don't want to not touch that topic, is the role AI will play in comms. All right. So if just quick responses across the table if we end the session.
So the second piece, I think both are connected. AI plays a role in comms. The quickly saying the kind of base level jobs that we are today looking at, those might be gone to AI, but still you will need an eye for detail. I don't know if AI will give you that eye for detail. So if you have to work in reputation, one line is you need to have an eye for detail and you need to anticipate things and take help of technology as much as it can, because it will evolve with time as it comes to. That's all.
Yeah, I think all of us know we got to become better prompt engineers to get AI to work for us the way we want it to work. But that said, it's also an opportunity for us to ensure that a lot of the basic things, like we see mistakes happening even today with humans, right? In the Copcom world as well, or with agency folks. And then you're like, probably, I've told this to my team saying, bhai, AI, we've got internal AI tools. I'm like, uspe dal do. Don't give me drafts that are poor, right? So basic things, I think. Otherwise, but like I said, if you keep yourself relevant, if you keep yourself promising enough to be able to understand, then nobody can take that seat away of yours. But what I want to tell to people, or the teams who are younger now about reputation, is also the fact that while everything is there, just ensure that you take a step back and learn to start looking at everything from a very business lens. Your business acumen is what is going to define whether you're able to carry reputation on your shoulder, whether you're able to carry something beyond that, and nothing else. And you cannot look at it in silos. You need to look at it from a more, when you walk into the room, you should be able to talk beyond, just PR for that matter, and tell the story and get your stakeholders, internal and external. You should, if you're somebody who wants to advocate, then you need to be somebody who has the knowledge in your hands. Otherwise, just talking 4 lines is not going to take you anywhere.
I think, I think I agree about it being integral to business. PR must be a must-have, not a good-to-have. So it's not about coverage and so on. It could at times be what not to say as much as what to say. It has to be absolutely integral to business, and therefore asking those really hard questions. The best compliment I remember receiving, and it was at Amazon, was a very big business leader telling me that Minari is so honest, she compels honesty out of us. And then I think the second point would be to PR is one area, perhaps there are others, I don't know, but I know PR and comms, where tactical and strategy go absolutely hand in hand. Long term and short term, and how much can you integrate your short term into the long term is critical. Kind of being able to keep that big picture, connect the dots, but integrate it and prioritize and not try to be everything to everyone, I think is critical. That prioritization is super critical. And 3, technology is your friend, but always have good guardrails. Yes, absolutely. I think all of us see AI as something that will help resource optimization. It will help cost effectiveness. We're all looking at it for drafts and prompts. But also remember, everything that you're putting out there is going out there. So if you're doing client work, if you're doing your company's confidential work, how are you using and how are you being conscious about that and being careful? The only way to do it is just play a lot with AI. Play with all the AI tools out there. That's the only way out.
I agree to all the points. I mean, hands down, it's very important to understand all these levers. I'm just going to add to that, the 2 things I feel are very important when you look at the future is just really, really telling the story well. Hold on to the story, don't forget that, because in the whole process of maneuvering everything, we end up losing sight of the actual story. So all those elements are very, very important. So the only point I'll add is the right storytelling. And the second is in the whole process of strategy, in the whole process, strategy is very, very, very important. But execution, very, very clear-cut execution, I actually see that missing in a lot of cases, in a lot of conversations where we all have our thoughts, right? We have the strategy, we have the campaign, we have the idea, we know what the end result is. But those small elements where the execution is, that is where, I mean, the devil is in the detail. Often we just fail in the detailing. So if we get that right and we marry execution and strategy well, and here is where AI is going to play an important role. AI will keep you honest. AI will also, our CTO says this very beautifully, AI will shift you from doers to thinkers. So get AI to do the doing, to get the efficiency right. But at the same time, when people keep saying that content writers and content functions are going to go irrelevant, the truth is you still have the human element. You still have the thought, you still have the story. AI is going to perhaps clean the copy for you. You will have to still give the right prompts. You will still have to get the human element involved in it. None of the algorithms are going to accept a pure AI copy. So AI, predictive analysis, content, all of that will become much better. Execution will become much better and significantly faster. You'll be able to do things, create content at scale, create strategies at scale, but you bring your thought process, your strategy, and your execution, embed it, and then work that together.
And be very quick. Sorry. Thanks. I'll be very quick. I'll make a quick parable with the stock market. I think all of us have been investing. We've gone through our highs and lows. PR, reputation, again, these are investments for the long term. You need to know how, where you place your bets, what are your short-term bets, what really are your long-term bets. Reputation, of course, any day, and there will be cycles of highs and lows, similar to how you'll see highs and lows in the market. AI comes in exactly how I would perhaps say the quality of data determines the quality of your decisions. So utilizing the right data, utilizing the right technology will make sure that your decisions and your bets, hopefully, are so much better.
Thank you so much. I think the quality of talent in the room, this would go on for hours. But no, the session is to end. I think a big recommendation to business world to keep a session next year on peacekeeping and conscious keeper and the highs and lows of the stock market and comparing it to reputation. So I think two interesting topics to discuss next year. But thank you so much, and a round of applause for the panel, please.